Well, I want to get your take on Philip Lowe. People are quite divided on this. I've obviously been very critical of the RBA governor just now, but others say it's not his fault, it's his job to bring down interest rates when inflation's this high. Do you think the attacks like mine on him are warranted?
Absolutely. I had Mark Bouris, the businessman and entrepreneur, on my program on Friday. He went into bat for Philip Lowe, saying he's probably the smartest bloke in the room, and the government needs to take responsibility for this, not just the current government, but the former government. But you look at those warnings. I mean, he was so clear in what he was saying, where he didn't need to make any of those projections. He didn't need to say to people, look, things look okay until 2024, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 interest rate rises. Here we are. More to come still. But, Shari, I can tell you, he's not going to be the Reserve Bank governor beyond September this year. There's no way in the world that your special guest today, Jim Chalmers, is going to tie himself to Philip Lowe beyond September. There are some very bright people on the Reserve Bank board, and most of these heavy statements telling us that there were going to be no rises until late 23, early 24, they came from Philip Lowe. They came from the head. So he won't be around beyond September. There's no way in the world that Jim Chalmers will renew his contract.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And we've seen Labor cabinet colleagues of Chalmers come out and be very critical of him. And even tonight in my interview, which is showing a bit later, Chalmers says that the RBA governor isn't above criticism. Now, Scott Pape, you mentioned Bouris. Scott Pape, you know, he's the barefoot investor. He relayed an email from one of his readers which actually asks why there is no class action being taken out against Philip Lowe and the RBA, because he made such unequivocal statements. What do you think about that? Do you reckon there could be a case for a class action against him?
No, I mean, there's not going to be a class action. I think Philip Lowe is protected by the role in which he sits. He's got to answer questions about forecasts. He's got to give us some understanding of where he thinks things are going. But you know what, Shari? He signed his own resignation letter when he spoke about the embarrassment. And keep in mind, he didn't do that initially. There was a lot of criticism through the second half of last year about Philip Lowe and those dodgy predictions. And it was only after a couple of months of that criticism that he said, it's embarrassing that I got it so wrong. So, you know, through his own words, I think he's decided to sink himself. Yeah. He'll try and hang on beyond September. But you've been around long enough, Shari, to know the politics of all of this. What is it that is an advantage to Anthony Albanese or Jim Chalmers in hanging on to Philip Lowe? There's none.
He's definitely out the door. Now, the other big issue that you've been talking about, Ben Fordham, on your show, including today, and you've got more on it tomorrow, is The Voice. There are some alarming comments today from a constitutional lawyer, Greg Craven, and he's part of the constitutional expert group that gives legal advice to the Prime Minister's referendum working group. Now, he warns that there are members of the Yes campaign who would rather see The Voice fail if it doesn't reflect their vision. What do you think of this?
Greg Craven is right. And look, if I can take you back a little bit on this, Shari.
You think he's right?
Late last year, I think he's right. There are members of the Yes campaign who are so obsessed with themselves and their set of words that they are going to prefer to go down with the ship rather than see those words change. So Noel Pearson is the person who's responsible for The Voice. That's why I've called it frequently Noel's voice. And if you have a look at the words that the Prime Minister shared in the Garma Festival in July last year, they're almost word for word Noel's voice. Noel's submission was one of 18 put forward to a council for recommendation. That council came back, the committee came back and said none of them are satisfactory. More work needs to be done. Albo grabbed Noel's words anyway, almost word for word. And that's why Noel is dead set on getting his words up. Tomorrow, an eminent Australian who's got a track record over 40 years of care and concern for Indigenous Australians is going to appear on my 2GB Breakfast Show and put forward his draft recommended words for the referendum that removes legal doubt and is a greater chance of getting up. And it's my belief, Shari, that the words that are going to be put forward tomorrow are the ones that will go to the referendum. There's no way in the world Noel's will, because we'll end up in the High Court for the next 10 or 20 years. Yeah,
but do you still think, Ben, and this is something you raised this morning on your show, do you still think we need some sort of public working group where Australians can give their views on what sort of model The Voice should take?
That's the crazy thing. When I interviewed Anthony Albanese at the start of the year, I said, what do people do who are sitting on the sidelines at the moment, worried about your draft set of words, who think they've got a better idea? And he said, well, Ben, you've got my mobile number. get in touch. And I said, no, not me. How does everyone else get in touch? And he then said, all right, well, we're going to have a parliamentary committee process. That is still not established. So that's why this eminent Australian is going to reveal his draft words tomorrow. He will also put forward a submission. And I've been saying for a number of weeks now, and I think the PM knows this, to be fair to Anthony Albanese, he has been saying, look, I'm not set in concrete here. If someone's got a better proposal, come forward with it. And I think he's already realised that the set of words that he put forward midway through last year are not going to fly. They won't make it till October. And October is going to be the month of the referendum. The PM hasn't locked that in, but I can tell you, mark the date in your diary, it is happening in October.
Yeah. Now, very quickly, Ben, before you go, on the energy front, Labor is desperately trying to pass its signature plan to cut emissions. It looks like it's going to be held hostage yet again. I mean, this is a repeat of the CPRS thing, held hostage by the Greens. They're saying they're not going to support it unless there's either a ban or at least a pause on new coal and gas projects.
Well, Anthony Albanese said last year that he wasn't going to do any deals with the Greens. He's done 2 already on the on industrial relations and another one as well on the Integrity Commission. And this is going to be the 3rd one on energy, but he's got to do a deal with the Greens. But don't you love that word pause? So Adam Bandt from the Greens said we want to stop all new coal and gas projects. Now they're talking about pausing them. So I don't know whether anyone's used the pause button at home before when they've had to duck off to the bathroom or take a phone call in the middle of watching Sky News. But when you press pause, you press play again. So I don't know why Adam's going to be satisfied with that. But you know what? If it gets a deal done and if it allows Australia to continue supporting coal and gas that keep the lights on and keep the TV going, then that's probably a smart result.
Yeah, exactly. He could pause it for 2 days if he wanted to.